Hello, comrades. So when I was a kid, I really liked those Little Debbie cosmic brownies. And later on, when I hadn't eaten any for a while, I decided I wanted to try one again. The problem is that it tasted horrible. It was not good, and I had outgrown it as a food, which I think is a pretty common experience. We all have those foods that we really liked as kids, and then we do outgrow. And then we have some other foods that we don't like as children, but we kind of grow into them. And as a kid, maybe it's a little older than when I was eating the Little Debbie brownies. I really liked the poem "The Raven" by Edgar Allan Poe. And given that it's perhaps the most famous poem ever written in English, I thought that was going to be a pretty widespread and universal opinion. But it turns out that it's not. If you read a lot of literary critics, you get kind of mixed reviews from more modern people, Harold Bloom, also people, contemporaries like even Mark Twain was not a fan of Edgar Allan Poe. And in fact, someone put together an article that has, I think, it's 25 quotes from just famous literary people, mostly authors or critics, who were bad-mouthing Edgar Allan Poe, and it was an entire spectrum where on the one hand you have he was a horrible person but a great writer, or a lot of people thought he was kind of vulgar, overly ornate, or maybe ornate isn't quite the right word. I think of it as a little bit like the Little Debbie brownie. It doesn't have a lot of substance, but it does have a lot of sugar, and for a lot of kids, like me when I was a kid, that was enough to make it taste good, and it's just not anymore. But I'm not actually that big of a poetry person. I really like The Raven. There are a few other poems I like, and mostly I just have a kind of a meh response to poetry, and something I've tried at various points to explore, and I wanna try to explore getting into poetry again and kind of find connection, maybe grow and broaden my horizons. And I do still really love the Raven. It's my favorite poem, but maybe I will try to outgrow it. But we're gonna start with our current exploration of the Raven. We're gonna read it. If you want to hear it uninterrupted, I'm gonna link someone with a much better reading voice than mine, so you can listen to the entire thing uninterrupted. But we're gonna read it, and I'm going to kind of summarize it as we're going along and point out anything I think is really interesting. And in general, I try and look for the best in things, but also I do want to put a little bit of effort to being a little more critical, maybe looking at what other people might have not thought was good about this poem, even though I loved it. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. And so right off the bat, this is a very unique poem. So it's written what's called trochaic octameter. We're going to break that down for you in case you haven't heard this phrase before. So trochaic just means that it's built, as all poetry is, with syllables. So in trochaic meter, we have a strong syllable, a syllable that's accented, followed by an unaccented or weak syllable. And that's the pattern that repeats. So it's strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. And normally with English, we do the opposite. We have iambs, and so in iambic meter, it's really common in rap and a lot of our poetry, but it's weak, strong. So like, when I die, I wanna go to hell because it actually doesn't even sound that poetic to me, just because it's so common, it's so natural to us, and I think it is really similar to how we talk. But when I hear trochaic meter like this, where it's starting off with a strong syllable, it really stands out as immediately telling me this is poetry. The next thing to note is that the lines are really long, so it's octameter. That means there are 8 feet. Each foot is made up with 2 syllables. So there are 16 syllables in total per line, except for the final line we'll get there, which is short. So this makes for a really long line, and we would have to wait for our rhymes to get there, but there is going to be some cool stuff with internal rhymes that I'm going to point out, and we can actually already see that. Dreary and weary, even though they're in the same line, are an internal line. We can also see a little bit of alliteration with weak and weary. And so with modern English poetry, we tend to think a lot about rhymes, I think, when the ends of the words sound similar, when they have the same ending, or more or less the same ending. We have slant rhymes, which we readily accept. Alliteration is the opposite. It's when the beginning, the first part of the word, sounds similar. And historically, this was actually way more important. If you go back to Old English, there wasn't any rhyming, or hardly any rhyming, but there was a lot of alliteration in our poetry, and it was super important. But as the language and culture evolved, we started to care more about rhyming, and alliteration became more of an ornament. Over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. So quaint and curious. It's not quite alliteration, quatir, but it's pretty close. And then with this end of this line, we have lore, and so we're gonna have this rhyme or that's going to repeat throughout the entire poem. I think it's because it's about a woman named Lenore, and obviously there's the very famous word spoken by the raven, nevermore. But we're gonna see this syllable or repeated in a very prominent position. It's going to be in the second, third, fourth, and final line of every stanza. And if you don't know, stanza is just a group of verses, and so in this case it's going to be 4 full verses and then a half verse at the end. In each one of those is going to be a stanza. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. And so we're going to see this a lot, where we have an internal rhyme, we have napping and tapping, and so it's going to be the word in the middle of the third verse is going to rhyme with the word at the end of that verse, and it's also going to rhyme with the word in the middle of the next verse. We also have some nice alliteration with nearly and napping. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, "tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more." So right now we have this guy. I always imagine him kind of a scholarly guy. He's reading a book in lamplight, so there's an ember. It's so it is the night. It's December. It's probably dark. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books the cease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden who the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And so he introduces his love. This is his central grief. He lost someone, and he's just heartbroken about it. And we can also see real quick that we have the same pattern. So we have a internal rhyme. Remember, December, and ember are all part of an internal rhyme. And then morrow, borrow, and sorrow, with sorrow repeated, are another internal rhyme. And this is on top of the normal rhyme scheme. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." And so we have some really nice alliteration, silken, sad, uncertain. We also have a nice extra rhyme, it's thrilled and filled, and we have the internal rhyme with uncertain and curtain. And then on top of that we have beating, repeating, and entreating, forming another internal rhyme, and entreating entrance as another set of words that alliterate. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there and nothing more." So the man hears the sound, he goes, he opens the door in the middle of the night, wondering who it is, and there's nothing. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back, the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. So in this darkness he says the name of the woman who he loved, who died. He says Lenore, and he hears it echoed back to him in the darkness. And we can see throughout this entire poem, we have the rhythm is on point, we have these internal rhymes, we have the normal rhyme scheme. I always found that very aesthetically pleasing, just from a perspective of linguistic ornamentation. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more. I really like the internal rhyme here where it has lattice and there lattice, as well as that is. But of course we still have the normal internal rhymes like turning and burning, and the major rhyme scheme. Opened here, I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore, not the least obsessance matey, not a minute's doctor statey, but with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched on a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat and nothing more. I really love this first line here. So we have flung is setting up the alliteration for flirt and flutter. And flutter has the internal rhyme with shudder. And we have the internal rhyme with matey, statey, and lord or lady. By the way, mean, in case you didn't know, is like the appearance. So the raven flies in when he opens the window and perches upon the bust of Pallas. So the bust of Pallas is like a bust, a sculpture of Athena. And so it's kind of continuing with the suggestion that this is a scholarly, a learned, well-read man. And now he has a bird, a raven, on top of his bust of Athena. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the continents it were. Though thy crest be short and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So the man instantly knows something is up. He says, you aren't just some raven wandering from the nightly shore. So the nightly shore I took to be the terrestrial shore outside. He says, basically, you're from the Plutonian shore. And shore, in this case, I would take to be the border. So Plutonian shore, because Pluto is the Greek god of death, is the border between death and life. So saying to this raven, surely, like, you're coming from the borderland between life and death. And then he asks the bird its name, and it says, nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl, to hear it discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as nevermore. So this might be the one time in the poem where this dude actually has a reasonable reaction, where the bird flies in and he's like, what is your name? And the bird says nevermore. The guy thinks, clearly this has never happened to anyone before. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather then he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. And so the guy, he has this absurd raven with the name Nevermore, which is really weird. And he's like, yeah, everyone else has left me. I don't, all of my friends left me. Lenore, died. And so he thinks everyone's going to leave me. He thinks the raven's going to leave me. He's like, tomorrow you're just going to leave me. The bird says the one thing that the bird does say, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock in store, caught from some unhappy master, from whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. So he's taken aback. This is the second time the bird has said nevermore. And so he thinks this is probably just the only thing the bird can say. It's only stock in store. By the way, dirge is a poem, a sad poem you read at someone's funeral, or maybe a piece of music like a requiem. So it's like a requiem of his hope is like the sad poem of the funeral of his hope. But the raven, still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy onto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of meant in croaking nevermore. I really love this second to last line, grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt. It's this really nice alliteration. And so he takes the cushion, he's sitting on it, he's sitting in front of the bust of Athena with the raven on top, and he's wondering what did this bird mean in croaking and saying nevermore, when obviously we already know it's the one thing the bird can say, and it's something the man himself, the narrator, knows, that the bird can only say nevermore. But he can't live with that. He has to question it. He has to sit with it. He has to ponder. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. And so he's thinking about it. He's like, what does this word mean? And he's lost in thought, but then he remembers that his love died. And that, I think, he really can't let go of that. By the way, or is an old-timey contraction of over. I had to look that up the first time I read this poem, and I always remembered that, so I figured it was nice to mention. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So he's trying to figure out, he's really grasping at anything this bird might mean, this raven might mean by saying nevermore. And then he gets really sad because he remembers that his love died, and he thinks, yes, this is it. The bird, the raven, was sent there to make things better, to give him respite and nepenthe. Nepenthe is a drug, I think it's from Homer, so like the Iliad or the Odyssey, that makes you forget your grief. And then quaff means to drink, so saying like, drink this magic juice that will make all of your emotions good. And then the raven says, nevermore. So the raven is kind of negating that, saying no, or just saying the one thing the raven can say. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed to thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly I implore, is there balm in Gilead, tell me I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And so now the guy is thinking, maybe the bird isn't good. Maybe the bird is a devil. Maybe it was sent by the tempter, which I took to be Satan. Or maybe tempest. If it's a tempest, which is a storm, I would take that to be kind of random chance. So I think he's kind of ruled out that this is an angelic raven. He's ruled out that possibility. And he's begging it, he's imploring it for some balm in Gilead, some respite for his sorrow. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell the soul with sorrow laden, if within that distant Aden it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this. Quoth is not related to the word quote. I always thought it was, because it means a very similar thing. It has a very similar pronunciation. The two are unrelated. But we have quoth the raven, nevermore. And so here he's asking if his soul, whether he will know his love again in Eden, which I take to be the Garden of Eden, or in this case, the kingdom of God, or heaven. And the raven just says the one thing the raven always says, which is, nah, nevermore. And we really do have to wonder why this man is still talking to the raven, why he is torturing himself talking to this raven that will only ever tell him that he will never see his love again. Be that word or sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest, into the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And so he gets really upset. He yells at the bird. He yells at the raven, tells it to leave. The raven says no. So, all of this man's friends might have left. His love might have left. But this raven isn't leaving. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul, from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor, shall be lifted nevermore. Yeah, so I still really like this poem, and I really like the language, I like the rhythm, I think there is something special about it. And I think, honestly, even if I do widen my poetic horizons, and I do become interested in other kinds of poetry and other poems, I think I'm still always going to have a special place in my heart for the raven. And so thinking of it as like you should outgrow it might be the wrong way of thinking about it. I think even for the cosmic brownie, right? Because there are people who like adults who like a cosmic brownie, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I happen to have liked it as a child, and now I no longer do. But I don't think that's really a lack of maturity. I could see that maybe, The Raven isn't necessarily the deepest poem in terms of the metaphor and the meaning. It's a pretty, simple metaphor. It's this man, he's grieving, and he seems to have lost everything, but now his grief is manifested by this raven, which he's kind of torturing himself with. The raven just keeps on saying nevermore, and he keeps asking the raven questions, even though he knows what the answer will be. I think we've all found ourselves in that position, maybe from grief or maybe for some kind of anxiety where we do know what the answer is and we just keep on torturing ourselves. I guess the light version of the raven would be when you can't sleep at 3 a.m. and you remember that embarrassing thing you said in the 4th grade that nobody else who was there remembers, but you do. Because I do think it goes two ways. Because I think when we have this thing where there are things you're supposed to grow into that are more sophisticated, that maybe harder to grow into, a lot of people might think that it's like a bit performative to enjoy those things, and I don't think that at all, or at least for the most case. And I think it is a possibility though, and I do wonder when people are overly quick to dismiss the raven, to poo-poo it. How much of that is performative? How much of that is, you can have this, hot take about, oh, the raven wasn't good actually, and that just is something that people really connect with on an emotional level, whether it be negative or positive. But I don't want to attribute, all of anyone who criticized the raven. Certainly about the man Edgar Allan Poe, there's enough to criticize just for being a bad human being. But I am interested in reading maybe more of Edgar Allan Poe's poems, reading some other kinds of poetry. There was one particular poem which was like the inspiration for the raven I'd be interested in reading. I also, there are quite a few people who think that Edgar Allan Poe is better translated into French. The Baudelaire translations. I do not happen to like Baudelaire, so I might look up the French translations of the Raven and make a comparison. Look at the other inspirations and just look at poetry more broadly. So if there were any poems, if anyone is still watching this video, it's going to be a long one. If there are any poems that you're interested in, please let me know if I should read them. But don't forget to drop me a like before you go, and good night, good day, good potato.